Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am Aniket Das and this time I want to talk about how the film Spider-Man No Way Home has altered 10 timelines. Okay, so it's more than a month since Spider-Man No Way Home has released into theaters, and for all those who haven't seen the film, I just want to say that um, that in this film we get to see three Spider-Man. I mean, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and uh, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. And actually, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield reprised their versions of Spider-Man from Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 respectively. Okay, so in this film, actually, we get to see the three Spider-Man trying to work on a cure for the villains, and they actually succeed in curing the villains. But they never anticipated such a consequence for their actions. Okay, so at the end of the film, at the end of the film, actually, Tom Holland's Spider Man asks Doctor Strange to cast a new spell so that everyone would forget. Actually. So, when Doctor Strange casts that spell, Tom Holland's Spider Man becomes all alone as his friends Ned and MJ forget him, and all the visitors from the multiverse, from other universes, they go back to their respective universes. But after the events of this film, their universes do not remain the same. So it's more than a month, and it actually occurred to me yesterday only. So I thought about making a video and sharing with you guys. So the first timeline which gets altered is the timeline in which Tobey Maguire was the Spider-Man. Okay, so Tobey Maguire reprises his role as Spider-Man from Spider-Man 3. I mean, by now he has already fought with villains like the Goblin and Doctor Octopus, Venom, and Sandman. Okay, so Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man returns to his universe, returns to his timeline, but with a tremendous knowledge about the multiverse. Now he knows that there are other Spider-Man across the multiverse, and he is not alone as Spider-Man. So this was the way in which the first timeline got altered. The second timeline was the timeline in which Andrew Garfield was the Spider-Man. I mean, Andrew's Spider-Man is back on screen after 2014's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, if anyone remembers, Andrew's Spider-Man loses his girlfriend Gwen Stacy at the end of Spider-Man 2. I mean, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And after that, he also admits that the times that the life after Gwen Stacy was very much tough for him, and he also got rageful, he got angry, full of negative emotions. He also admits about all these things. So when he goes back uh, to his universe, he goes back but a lot wiser than he was. Okay, so the third timeline in which uh, in which a change is observed is the timeline in which Norman Osborn does not become the Green Goblin. I mean, as the villains are cured by the end of Spider Man No Way Home and are also teleported back to their universes, Norman Osborn is now cured of his Green Goblin appearance, and since in his timeline Spider Man was very much younger, I mean Peter Parker, So there is a tremendous amount of opportunities, a tremendous amount of possibilities in which Norman Osborn becomes an ally of Peter Parker, and and I actually cannot stop thinking about this timeline. I mean, according to the comics, Green Goblin was a big enemy of Spider-Man, amongst others. I mean, an enemy trying to become an ally of the hero sounds interesting. Sounds very much exciting. So this was the third timeline. The fourth timeline is a consequence of this timeline. I mean, if uh, if you see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man trilogy, in the first film, uh, actually, Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn was the Green Goblin, but in Spider-Man 3, Norman Osborn's son, Harry Osborn, becomes the Green Goblin. So, so either this timeline can continue, or another timeline can branch out in which Harry Osborn does not become the Spider-Man. Sorry, does not become the Goblin. So, Harry Osborn not becoming the Goblin and Norman Osborn not becoming the Goblin, and both becoming allies of Spider Man instead, sounds even more exciting. So, this was the fourth timeline. The fifth timeline was the timeline in which Venom actually kills Spider Man. So, at the end of Spider Man 3, we actually get to see Tobey Maguire's Spider Man and James Franco's Green Goblin versus Sandman and Venom at the end of Spider Man 3, which released in 2007. So, with no Goblin to intervene in between Spider Man and Venom, Venom actually sees that it is very much easy to kill Spider Man and actually succeeds. So, this is another timeline which branches out as a result of the actions in Spider Man No Way Home. So, that was the fifth timeline. Talking about the sixth timeline, the sixth timeline is the timeline in which Doctor Octopus lives on. I mean, if you have seen Spider Man 2, which released in 2004, uh, at the end of that film, actually, Alfred Molina's Doctor Octopus actually dies. So, as a result of previous timelines, I mean, young Norman Osborn, who is no longer the Goblin, and an even younger Spider Man, both working as allies for, I mean, for Doctor Octopus. I mean, Doctor Otto Octavius. It's actually a new timeline, a new possibility that uh, Doctor Otto Octavius's um, experiment does not go wrong, and he lives. So this is another timeline, but there's another chance that Dr. Octavius returns back to his universe at the exact moment where his experiment has already gone out of hand and he has to destroy the setup. So these are two timelines which are a result of Dr. Octavius going back to his universe. Among these two timelines, the first one is he is cured and he lives on. The second one is he is cured but he still dies. Okay, so the eighth timeline is the timeline in which Sandman, Flint Marko, is cured. Okay, so as we know, as it's already known to us, in 2007's Spider-Man 3 and in 2021's Spider-Man No Way Home, Sandman says the same thing, that he has a daughter and he wants to meet him. But this form, this Sandman form prevents him from doing so. Okay, so now that he is cured of his form and he goes back to his universe, uh, he is now able to meet his daughter. So this one was the eighth timeline. The ninth timeline was the timeline in which the lizard is cured. Okay, so now that lizard is cured and he reverts back to Dr. Kurt Connors, the human form, and he goes back to his universe, there is a probability that he now works for Oscorp as an ally and he leads a normal life. Okay, so this was the ninth timeline, and the tenth and the last timeline is for Electro. I mean, now that Electro is cured and he now leads a normal life as Max Dillon, who also works for Oscorp, and and along with Dr. Connors, Max Dillon is now an ally of Oscorp and of Spider-Man also. I forgot to say this. In ninth and 10th timelines, both Dr. Connors and Max Dillon are allies of Spider Man. They become the allies of Spider Man now that they are cured. Okay, so this was my theory on how Spider Man No Way Home has altered these 10 timelines. So, thank you for watching. And if you actually liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.